without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Max for the weekly updates. Then we'll get into your questions and some other stuff.
All right, awesome. Welcome everyone to another Midweek with Max. Obviously a little quieter going into the holidays, but good to see a lot of people still showing up. As far as updates on the engineering side, we've pretty much finished the V2 deployment on Mainnet. So we're still keeping one peer-to-peer node on V1 for people still running V1. We're going to get a official release tag out for V2, so we will be improving our release process going forward to make it more clear what images everyone should be running and finish up the migration from the local node from the old Hemi network repo, not the old, it's still the Hemi network repo, but moving it out of there to its own local node repo. So we'll be pushing out some stuff on that this week for anyone who's running nodes either on testnet or mainnet. That'll come with upgrade instructions and how to run V2. V2 does include a large TBC database upgrade. So there's a lot of re-indexing that it has to do. So just a heads up on that. If you're running nodes for stuff, there will be roughly 12 to 24 hours of time to upgrade that TBC instance. So if you're running a node and you need to keep it online, you can clone your V1 node, keep that running while you do a V2 upgrade. Let's see, beyond that, I've been doing a lot of work on the MinerFi side and making progress there. So working on the coordination daemon for that does all the Bitcoin transaction building and key resharing. And then we're kicking off development on the smart contracts probably sometime this week. And then let's see, everything went good with the Fusaka update. We did have one issue with some third-party RPC providers we were using, but we got that fixed, so everything's looking good there. Also this morning, the BPO one fork activated on Ethereum mainnet, and everything went smooth for that. So everything's looking good on that side. The next BPO update, I think, is sometime next week, so we'll be keeping an eye on that. Let's see, pop payouts. Now that we finally got V2 shipped in our infrastructure, we're going to be deploying that this week on testnet, so people can start playing around with the V2 pop payouts algorithm. And I think that's most of the main things. We're also starting, and I don't know if Rick, if you want to add anything to this, but we are going to be starting a more formal like beta program for people who want to beta test early stuff. And so we're still putting that program together and what it'll look like. But stay tuned for some updates there probably next week. So for anyone who wants to play around with staked Hemi BTC early or some of the other things that we'll be launching in the near future, we'll be giving previews through that beta channel so people can play around with it, report any bugs they find. And yeah, still doing a lot of work on ZK provability. We also pretty much finished up the hBVM white paper. JCV finished his final edits. We do have some feedback coming in from the rest of the team who's reviewing it today. And so we should get that shipped soon, and then we'll probably schedule that breakout AMA for doing a tech deep dive on that early next week. So expect the white paper to probably go out Thursday, Friday, and then give people the weekend and probably Monday, Tuesday to review it. And then we'll maybe do the AMA either Wednesday or Thursday, or maybe carve out part of Midweek with Max, just depending on the timing of shipping that and how long it takes people to review it. So stuff's moving there, and I think that's pretty much everything on the update side. VBK stuff still is coming. We're obviously with Fusaka and V2. There's been other priorities, but we are still looking at getting that done before the end of the year for sure. So that is in progress, and I think that's pretty much everything. So I'll hand it back over to Rick, and we can go through questions.
Thank you, sir. Let me just give a little more context to the beta program. So yesterday I discussed with Joshua and JCV. It's basically going to work similar to the builder role. So beta testers, there will be a private channel and a role attached to it. It's completely voluntary. I believe there's going to be some criteria that it checks, but nothing like super intense or anything. So it's really open to the entire Hamigo community, and it's going to be pretty cool. You'll get, first glances at a lot of the cool tech that's coming out of Hemi, and yeah, like Max said, we'd appreciate the feedback, the bugs and the support. So look for that probably next week, I believe, is a realistic timetable for that. If it takes a little longer, My apologies, but we're targeting next week, I believe. Josh, JCV, if you want to correct me on that, feel free. Um,
I will say one. I want to know what you said. It's voluntary. What does a mandatory beta test look like? You will test our software,
yes, I just assign the role to people and be like, test.
or else.
Yeah.
But I will say the one thing in what we're, you know, unlike say a role like the OG role, which has a lot more to do with both when you showed up and your participation in the community. This we want people who can actually test and poke around at a a DeFi app. So if it's not going to be for if you've never interacted with the apps in the Hemi ecosystem. It's for people who've poked at it and would like to poke at early versions and provide feedback on that. And you have to be someone who's not going to freak out if a button disappears on a page when you think there should be one. You're working on things that are still rough and don't quite work fully, maybe. We test things internally, of course, but more people touching things are always going to find something crazy that we haven't. So, for someone who wants to be able to, feels like they want to see something new ahead of everyone else, is comfortable poking around in DeFi stuff, and you already use a wallet, and you're willing to give feedback on such things.
Also, it's
And
not
you
just about bugs, but also usability feedback. So maybe something works fine, but it's confusing. We'd also appreciate knowing about that so we can make things easier for people to interact with because we're in our own vacuum developing it. We know how it works. And sometimes you get blind to, you know, how actual users are going to interact with it and understand certain components. So
Yes, like if you go to something and you're like, okay, look, a normal DeFi app doesn't behave this way. It may have looked normal to us. That is useful feedback. It's like this is not how a normal app behaves for sure. We want things to be usable to be as familiar and usable to people as they can. So, and it's almost familiar to us by default. So we're not the best viewers of that.
true. And if you're like Miracle or Foxstar, it is a new shiny role that you can add to your collection. Speaking of collections, check out the Hemi Community Collection, available now on the Hemi merch store. I had to get my one plugin for the week. There will probably be another one. All right, let's get into questions. JCV said the magic word, so what the hell? Let's start with that one. Gentlemen, when OG roll?
still in progress. Joshua's working on finishing up some final bits still. Obviously got pulled away for other stuff with all the Fusaka updates and node running stuff, but that is still being worked on and for lack of a better term, coming soon. I don't think we have an exact date, but I'll throw it over to Joshua if he has any updates on that side.
I believe either late this month or early next month. Still a work in progress, mostly UI items remaining, and then some work on the Discord bot.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Okay, let's get into a couple more whens. When can we expect a concrete date for VBK updates?
Definitely, it will be launched before the end of the year. So hopefully sooner, but that is the drop dead date for it.
All right, that's incredible news. All right, what is the roadmap for Hemi BTC staking, and what will rewards look like?
Uh, Good question. So Hemi BTC staking, that's going to be the first thing we roll out in the beta program. So if you want to participate in that early, that'll be a way to access it, probably starting sometime next week. All the contracts are deployed. It's just a matter of, well, and the UI is built, but just a matter of doing some final testing there before we launch it, and maybe finding an interesting launch partner to go to market with. So the full public launch of that will probably be either the end of this month or early next month. Obviously, with holidays and people being out and stuff, some stuff moves slower towards the end of December. So probably either before Christmas or right after New Year's for the full launch. As far as rewards, it is going to start with a 7% APY through Merkle incentives. And then over time, we're going to be adding more strategies as we get more Bitcoin yield sources on chain, and so basically it'll automatically reallocate the underlying hemi-BTC into those strategies if they can provide a higher APY. So starting at 7% and then changing over time based on the different hemi-BTC yield sources that we have available on chain.
Right. Speaking of rewards, when will VE Hemi rewards be available?
If they're asking about the next reward cycle, probably December 9th. Definitely before Christmas, so probably either next week or early the week right before Christmas will be the next VE Hemi reward cycle.
All right. Where are we? Oh, I assume this is a question from Miracle, and I do see a John Greenwood. When will a new NFT marketplace launch on Hemi?
About that. So yeah, I still I get the same kind of answer as before. Working on some randomness functionalities with Randau and a couple of other small pieces. Also, did actually just yesterday engage with Marketplace that seems to be pretty serious. So just some updates there, but no further clarity on a timeline for this. Hopefully very soon. Something that spending a good amount of side power on in order to get this, to fruition for you. Specifically, just for you, Miracle, just for you. So, when I know more, I will let you know. I promise.
All right, Miracle. We will hopefully get you some updates on the NFT marketplace, specifically for you, but also for other amigos interested in the NFT marketplace. Um, wait, Josh, these are real questions? Okay. When koala? Uh, what? Max, you want to take that one?
I mean, now, I mean,
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, just follow him on X. Or if you are looking for some koala merchandise, you can check out the Hemi Community Collection, available now on the Hemi store. Alex has posted the link. It has all your gifts and goodies for the holiday season, so please check it out. And that's where you'll find koalas. Um, the last question, asked by Dom. When Odyssey?
I don't know their timeline. So there was one dependency that we needed on our side for some of their cross-chain and account abstraction stuff that we got deployed. So yeah, I don't know about their timeline. I'd probably assume something in the next month to 2 months here, maybe sooner. But yeah, that'd be a question for them for when they're gonna deploy stuff and start adding in compatibility with Hemi and making that public. Maybe that's something we could also do through the beta program too to get people early access to it.
Yeah, I'd also like to point out that Dom is literally a employee at Odyssey, so he's definitely memeing there. At the same time, very soon should have more updates on that.
In that case, Dom, we should ask you when Odyssey. Why are you asking us? We should be asking you, sir. That is shockingly the end of questions. Josh, am I missing anything? Oh, no, yep. Here, oh God, here we go. All right. Since the delivery date, wow, let me try that again in English. Since the delivery date for VBK is by end of year, does that mean that the VBK testing was successfully completed on Testnet?
I've done some testing on Testnet. We're still going to do the public testing on Testnet though before we do the full mainnet claim.
All right. When karaoke? We'll do one next week. How about, wait, actually, let me think. Yeah, we'll do it next week because I'm actually going on holiday on December 22nd, for until January 2nd. So we'll do a little holiday community karaoke next week for anyone who wants to get the Rap God roll before the end of the year. So that answers that question. Let me think if we have any other updates. Yes, there are a couple that I can mention super quick while I wait for further questions to come in. Um, yeah, Josh, if you see any Ask Max style questions like last week, we can take some of those as well. So I actually have a meeting with a crack team of wonderful folks today at 2 p.m., including John Greenwood and Jeremy and Joshua and Ryan Charleston, and we are working out some details for the ambassador program that will be launching very early 2026. Just have a couple more details to figure out, but that will be coming. It'll be a more formal ambassador program than, say, the Hemi Alliance. It'll have some rewards attached, some daily activities, and I think you guys will really enjoy it. We're working on it. It's just kind of a slower process around the holidays and whatnot. So expect that in early 2026. Beyond that, we will be launching a holiday meme contest that our moderators will be running starting, I believe, tomorrow and through the 23rd of December. And also next week, I believe there will be a Smash Carts tournament starting off in Discord, also run by our moderator team. So those are the updates that I have. Oh, and there's another update. After Midweek with Max, there is a Rumble managed by Utam on the Hair server, as always. So please go check that out and support the fine folks over at the Hair Token. Oh, also the fifth riddle for the Hair Advent contest was released today. Thank you, Alex. I'm getting updates in real time. So sorry. Do we have anything else for Max and team? Yes, we do. How is Hemi focusing on security as part of being institutional ready? And what institutional compliance standards are Hemi following?
Good question. We talked about this quite a bit in last week's episode, so I'll keep this a little shorter today. But basically, tons of just industry standard best security practices across our different code bases, our backend infrastructure. We're not doing anything like SOC 2 compliance yet, but we are looking at potentially doing some of those things if it's compliance stuff that institutions would be interested in. So right now we're talking to some of them and seeing what compliance things they want to see on their side before we spend a bunch of time implementing something that's not what they want to see. And then longer term, obviously part of that solution is decentralizing stuff. So it's not just stuff that we're running, but it's a decentralized protocol that everything from sequencing to the Bitcoin tunnel with hBVM and one of them trust models and stuff like that's all in place. So it's definitely a roadmap, but something that we're doing a lot internally for security best practices, and then something that we're looking at improving over time depending on what particular things institutions want to see on the more formal compliance side.
All right. Thank you. And we have a follow up from Japan 1012. How large is Hemi's team? And how big are the engineering teams and security teams?
Well, it's around the holidays, so I mean, we all got a little bigger, I'm sure.
I don't know if that's how heavy or how many. Right now, engineering across the Hemi Zone team, not all of the Hemi and all the sister projects. Engineering's roughly 10 to 11 people, depending on how you count some of the shared smart contract resources. And then security team, we have a dedicated SecOps team internally. And so that's 2 people formally, but obviously a lot of us are security minded and keep an eye on stuff on the SecOps side as well.
The numbers are actually it's somewhat hard to account because when you have small teams, people do have to wear multiple hats. So, and honestly, how well defined is something like SecOps when, the overlap between SecOps and DevOps and, whoever it is that you want to label as running like the core protocol parts are, it's more of a Venn diagram than it is an org chart, which I think is almost a natural occurrence of both the type of things we're doing, the size we're working at, and the fact that you know, it's not. This isn't like say there are things where the roads are very well worn and you know exactly how to do it. This there is still a lot of you know proper blockchain security is something people are still working through. You know, it's not there isn't a perfect checklist list that people follow that you could hand off to a SecOps team and it's done. It's something that's done both much closer with the protocol, with the people who are doing protocol and all of the other various bits like that. So, yeah, I'm going to stick with Venn diagram, not org chart, which is why the exact numbers are depend on how you feel like counting them.
I fully support that. Also, we just had a midweek with Max first, everyone. Someone sent a spam link in the chat. They were immediately banned, but that the pardon my French, but the balls on that fella. While the team is all here, including all the moderators.
Wait,
That
and
takes a
did
lot.
he also do it while we were discussing security?
Literally, as we were discussing security, some joker tried to send a spam link. I'm gonna
Yeah,
go with
right.
joker because the other words aren't safe for work.
Yeah, that takes balls to do that.
That
That's a
does.
little more.
That's a set right there.
Yeah.
Okay, we have some additional questions, gentlemen. Um, do you think Hemi will be the best chain for institutions to earn yield on their Bitcoin? Why or why not?
Yeah, that is definitely the goal. A couple of reasons why. A lot of the stuff that we're doing with hBVM also has applications to other stuff beyond just bridging/tunneling protocols. And so one of a couple of the examples of what you can build with basically a remix of that tech, you can do a better version of native Bitcoin staking that doesn't have the extractable one-time signature slash ability limitations of stuff like other projects' approaches to native Bitcoin staking so far for economic security systems. So we can build a better version of that based on some small tweaks, small in air quotes, but small tweaks to the hBitVM protocol. There's also cool stuff we can build with native Bitcoin backed stablecoins, native Bitcoin backed financial derivative products. So being able to build options and futures that are fully collateralized by actual native Bitcoin that can be delivered depending on the execution of the contract. And so there's also applications there for treasury management. So being able to, institutions, it's not just about finding yield, but it's also about being able to manage a treasury effectively. And so some of the things we can do with hBitVM tech also have applications there for giving them more secure ways to buy and sell Bitcoin, hedge Bitcoin positions, things of that nature. Some of the MinerFi stuff that we're doing, not the initial MinerFi, Bitcoin onboarding and put it into DeFi system, but some of the other MinerFi items like being able to or working, for example, with Lumerin to do some interesting stuff around Bitcoin hash rate futures. And so there's also some things in there that could be productized for institutional treasury management and as another Bitcoin yield source and being able to also hedge Bitcoin price in a little more indirect way. And then we're all obviously working on a lot of on-chain, non-HBitVM. We are thinking of renaming that to a easier to pronounce name, by the way. But we're also working on a lot of the DeFi side of it. So one of the initiatives is getting a lot of Bitcoin liquidity between a lot of the different types of Bitcoin in the ecosystem. And so being able to basically provide liquidity for whatever version of Bitcoin you want to trade in. And then that's obviously a yield source as well for fees and people want to market make in like kind pairs and probably tons of other cool stuff with other partners on the DeFi side. But yeah, it's a short answer. End goal is to be the best place to get yield, whether that's institutional or standard DeFi. And one of the competitive advantages for that is all of the highly secure Bitcoin primitives we can spin out of the base hBitVM tech as well.
Awesome response there. I have a follow-up regarding more security questions that I think both yourself and JCV will be into. Have Hemi security audits and bug bounty programs majorly improved the security of the project in any way? And have there been many interesting findings?
Definitely on the audit side, yes. I mean, auditors usually find stuff that you miss when you're creating the smart contract, especially with really complicated systems. So definitely been some findings there that were useful. As far as the bug bounty program, we've definitely got some good submissions. It's mostly to this point been around stuff on the UI side. So I don't know if JCV, if you want to comment more on some of those items, but it has definitely been helpful. And there's been a lot of really good Web 2 and Web 3 security researchers poking at stuff and finding either things to improve or potential issues that could be exploited in some weird esoteric way. That's good that they found it and we can patch it. So I'll also throw that over to JCV to comment on that further.
Yeah. So, I mean, like Max said, it's mostly the bug bounty has primarily shown up as web vulnerabilities in a, so we haven't had too much of interest on the, core daemons, although if someone wants to look at them, that would be cool. And the web stuff, there have been, as I'm sure everyone who's paying any attention notices, there have been various JavaScript and NPM related issues, some of which it's good to see we don't have a problem with. Others we potentially would have, and we caught much quicker because of the, some really good researchers on the bug bounty than we would have. Occasionally you get some sort of silly ones that are just kind of funny and not too helpful, but for the most part, it's been the expected set of Web 2 ones and NPM related vulnerabilities. Nothing. Yes, React to Shell, that we got that in most places on our own. There was one, it did show up in one place and got fixed very quickly because of a, researcher finding it, which is awesome. The fact that React to Shell exists at all is a, whole other security topic as to how those developers thought that was a good idea. I can't even imagine, but what are you going to do? But yes, it has helped our security. It has found things. So the fact that it's found things is good, because on the sort of web security side, you have to remember, generally speaking, individually, most vulnerabilities that people find aren't that exciting and aren't that interesting. It's usually where things get good is where people start chaining vulnerabilities together, and that's where you get the real horrible compromises. And every time someone finds and we get to fix one of these little ones, some, whatever the current shit show that NPM has decided to inflict on the world, it helps because that's one less thing that can be used in a chain. Or when we confirm that last place that React to Shell thing was, that is one more hole patched, so it's less likely that someone could chain that together.
Also, speaking of the funny vulnerability reports, one of the most amusing ones we got was that our Explorer showed the source and destination addresses for blockchain transactions, and that was a privacy concern, which was amusing.
Oh, that I love that. It's like, look, we're not Monero. I wish every chain had the privacy of Monero, but that's not the world we live in.
Speaking of that, we do actually want to do some privacy stuff in the future. So one of the designs we're looking at is a privacy preserving ZK HEML3. So as one of the first use cases, a chain builder doing a private, not a full EVM, but a private fund transfer and trading with a central limit order book. So that is something as a totally unrelated to that report, but we do want to start doing some things in the privacy side at some point. Obviously lower priority than a lot of the other stuff we're working on the actual HEMI L2 base layer.
Yep, because the thing is, deep down, privacy is a lot of work, and to do privacy, you have to do it right. An L3 type of solution with chain builder is great because you're isolating that work from other work. Where a lot of people have gone wrong with privacy in both Web 2 and Web 3 is, as soon as you start mixing things together and mixing concerns, there's just entirely too many ways to screw it up. You need to, privacy's work that you have to get right, because if you get it wrong, if you get it wrong in one place, you're not private. So
So, John, you mentioned some funny things that came in. Could you share some of them? Some of the more ludicrous or absurd?
the most absurd is the one Max just mentioned, that the Block Explorer, shows private transaction details. Because that's what a Block Explorer does. That is literally the purpose of it. That would be like complaining that Google shows results for searches, which it used to do.
Oh, good call. Good call. Or like being like, why aren't there more pasta options at this Chinese restaurant?
And that's a valid question.
Sorry, I was thinking about food for a second. And and,
Yes,
and
I'm kind of hungry now.
I know. I kind of want pasta and Chinese. That would be incredible. We onto more serious things. Um, oh, thank God, quantum computing is back. I love this. This is like a new weekly thing. Ask Max and JCV about quantum computing. Well, welcome to this segment. Are you confident in Ethereum, Bitcoin, and Hemi's ability to implement quantum computer resistance against Shor's algorithm?
So generally, yes, we did I think we talked for like 30 minutes on maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, midweek with Max, so I won't rehash that entire conversation, but uh, Ethereum has a roadmap that they're putting together for post-quantum cryptography. On the Ethereum side, there's a couple of things that are tricky, and I don't think well, I know for a fact there's not finalized solutions for yet, but there is work in progress, and I'm sure by the time quantum computing is an issue, we'll have fixes in for it on the Ethereum side, and then a lot of that is easily adoptable, obviously, into the Hemi side of things. There is some post-quantum stuff that you could start doing today if you wanted to, both on Ethereum and EVM, hVM networks like Hemi, and also to some extent on Bitcoin. So on the Ethereum side, basically you have KZG, which is the way that Ethereum basically allows efficient commitments to blobs, the DA blobs that are stored that L2s like Hemi use. And so you need a post-quantum replacement for KZG, you need a post-quantum replacement for BLS. And one of the hard parts on the BLS side is signature aggregation. So the way Ethereum's proof of stake consensus works is basically you have, a million-ish validators, and they're all basically every 6 minutes, roughly, all those million validators are all signing attestations to blocks that they believe are safe final in the current safe chain tip. And so obviously you can't have every node validating a million signatures every 6 minutes. And so one of the nice properties of BLS is you can do non-interactive signature aggregation. So the way that Ethereum implements this is it has these peer-to-peer subnets, and each of the validators broadcasts their signature, and then you have participants in the peer-to-peer subnet that aggregate. Basically, you can think of it like, in air quotes, adding the signatures together. And so that allows, the end result is, generally speaking, your node that's syncing with the Ethereum network gets a block, and it has one aggregated BLS signature that represents signatures from, per block, 30-ish thousand validators. And so there's not really a good post-quantum algorithm that allows signature aggregation at that scale. There is one lattice-based construction that I think, am I spacing on that name of the blockchain? A QRL, quantum resistant ledger, I think that they were working on, but that's, to my knowledge, probably still in a research phase. So there are potentially ways that you could get around that with ZK proofs, but it's a lot less computationally efficient. So you can either have signature aggregation directly in the underlying cryptography, so as in what you can do with BLS. But you can also aggregate signatures by producing a ZK proof of verifying multiple different signatures together. And so it's not a perfect drop-in replacement, but there's ways that we could do it with ZK algorithms that we do believe are post-quantum at this point in time. One of the other things with post-quantum is the algorithms that we say are quantum resistant is just because nobody's figured out a good quantum algorithm for breaking them yet. So it may be no algorithm exists, or maybe nobody found it. If we hadn't found Shor's algorithm, we might think ECDSA is quantum resistant today, right? So I'm sure there's going to be some developments in the post-quantum cryptography space that find that some of the security assumptions that we're relying on for what we think are post-quantum may actually be attackable by quantum computers. So that's yet to be seen, and that's going to be a thing to keep an eye on over the next few years. And then also for all of the post-quantum ZK algorithms, their proof sizes are a lot larger. And so, in the Ethereum context, that's probably not the end of the world, but it's, you're going from a few hundred bytes for current ZK proofs like, Groth 16 to potentially 10, 20, 50, 100 kilobytes in some cases for some of the post-quantum ZK proven construction. So that's also going to have a knock-on effect of what you can verify on-chain for doing like cross-chain ZK proven chain state proofs. Right now verifying something like risk zero's proving system without wrapping it in a Groth 16 proof is impractical on the EVM side, but I'm sure if we're moving towards post-quantum on the Ethereum side, there will be some changes to Ethereum, new precompiles, maybe new things in how you can include and validate much larger ZK proofs in a way that doesn't have to be directly implemented in regular Solidity, that could be used to get around some of those inefficiency problems. So short answer, yes, I think Ethereum is going to update to sufficient post-quantum algorithms before it's ever an issue, and Hemi will inherit a lot of that work from Ethereum. On the Bitcoin side, I also think that we'll probably see post-quantum cryptography on Bitcoin before it's an issue, but Bitcoin does move slow, so there's always a bit of a concern there, but I'm sure if there's a real threat of quantum computing breaking the existing cryptography, that we will see everyone get together and make sure that Bitcoin's also appropriately updated.
One little bit I want to add, since Max, you mentioned that the difference between things with known ways to break with quantum, and one bit that's sort of, and remember, I'm usually one of the sort of quantum skeptics, in the sense that quantum computing has been just a few years away from being practical for many, many years. But we have to remember Shor's algorithm, for example, originates, it's not that old in the scheme of things. Like that originates in, I think, the mid or early 90s. So that one is usable physical actual quantum computers. And there's only a few other interesting. There's like Grove or Grover's, I forget which one, algorithm 2, but there aren't that many. And if you were to, sorry, I heard some weird noises outside. If you were to think about it, how many of the algorithms for doing things like factoring numbers, say, that we have today, actually predate usable computers? Versus how many of them came out after we had usable general purpose computers? As quantum computers have more utility and use, more researchers are going to get their hands on them, and there's always the likelihood that people are going to come up with more and better algorithms that are built for doing things of interest on quantum computers once they actually have access to them, as opposed to things like Shor's algorithm that originate at a time when a quantum computer was a purely theoretical construct. Not that much programming was done when computers were a purely theoretical construct. I mean, there's some, you've got all of the Ada Lovelace type stuff, but not much in comparison to all of the mess of things that have happened since.
Yep, and a lot of the security assumptions that post-quantum or quantum-resistant algorithms rely on, like, lattice-based learning with errors, they have not been studied to the extent that number factoring has, or the discrete log problem. And so there's, as far as we know, they're secure against quantum computers just because nobody's come up with a quantum algorithm for breaking them. But there's we're still in the infancy of a lot of that cryptography, and it has not had the amount of academic attention looking at it for decades that the current quantum insecure algorithms today have been reviewed. Even for classical algorithms, we may find that there's not you don't maybe you don't even need a quantum algorithm for breaking some of these. Maybe there's a classic algorithm or an issue with the underlying mathematical assumptions that again doesn't even need a quantum computer and just nobody thought of because it hasn't been as heavily studied yet. Not saying that will be the case. I mean, I'm sure we will have workable post quantum algorithms for sure, but I think the jury's still out on some of the underlying security assumptions for some of these that were, again, people haven't been staring at them for decades or had access to a quantum computer to try a bunch of things and, develop more interesting quantum algorithms. So
All right. Here's an interesting one. Max, what are your thoughts on Zcash versus Monero?
Good question. I'm not super familiar with. I saw I also mentioned Monero's FCMP upgrade. Not familiar with that. I don't follow the uh, privacy coins super closely. I would generally trend towards Monero, but I think Zcash is also very good tech from the bits of it that I've looked into in the past. So I, I think both projects are good, but yeah, I'm not a probably not fully qualified to comment on the technical nuances, especially with recent developments in both of those projects.
And even though I wasn't asked, I will say, I also am not super fully qualified on them, and I have not followed the recent developments very closely. But historically, I've always been very, very pro Monero. I was a big fan of the ring signature idea. I think the idea of having privacy as a default, as the only way the chain functions, makes more sense to me than having it as an opt-in feature. And every Monero developer that I've worked with, and I have known a pretty large number of them, have been, really top notch at what they do and really cared about the privacy aspects of it. So I remain my heavily biased and completely not fully informed view is I always go Monero. Also have a Raspberry Pi sitting around here somewhere mining Monero, which obviously it does not do enough to get anything useful, but it does do enough that it slightly melted the PLA, 3D printed case I have the Raspberry Pi in. And yet it's still running, so score, I guess.
Yeah, that sounds like a win. Um, okay. Um, y- the Hemi team seems very small compared to the majority of other projects. Do you plan on hiring more engineers in Q1?
Not sure about Q1, but definitely we will be scaling up the team at some point in the relatively near future. Part of this also is we want to start getting bits of the protocol decentralized, and that doesn't just mean decentralized from a tech perspective, but also decentralized from a development perspective. And so one of the initiatives we'll have going into the new year, January, will be a much more robust developer grants and bounty program. And so basically, there's a lot of cool stuff that we want to see on Hemi that we don't want to build and maintain ourselves, but they're cool ideas for projects. And so we'll be trying to spin out a lot of those interesting ideas like, for example, maybe a Bitcoin MEV marketplace or some other DeFi primitives, some other HVM based applications, and trying to get third party teams to start building up some of that, non-core protocol infrastructure.
All right. Here's one. Thoughts on ASICS versus ASIC resistant protocols and algorithms such as RandomX.
Interesting question. I think the I used to be more bullish on ASIC resistant. I think RandomX has still done a good job of being ASIC resistant so far, but some of that may also be due to there not being enough financial incentive for somebody to really put in the R&D to develop one. So we've seen, I mean, even going back to, the first quote unquote, it started as GPU resistant, and then it went to, well, okay, not GPU resistant, but FPGA resistant. And then, okay, well, not FPGA, but maybe ASIC. And then, oh, doesn't have that too, was a script back in Litecoin when that launched in whatever that was, 2011. And so since then, we've seen a lot of projects do things that they think are ASIC resistant, end up not being ASIC resistant. Even Ethereum's Fhash was originally supposed to be ASIC resistant and wasn't. There was just a sort of a interesting note. We a very long time ago for Veriblock tried to implement a version of ProgPow that was not ASIC resistant, but had a way that over time it became more ASIC resistant as the hash rate increased. So it was sort of a counter incentive to building ASICs for the system. So there's some interesting work there, but it's I'm generally not too bullish on ASIC resistant stuff. Other than to date, it does seem like RandomX has done a good job, but again, that could just be a lack of proper financial incentives to really put in the R&D required.
And it's an arms race. Like, you always, no matter what, it ends up as an arms race, and that it's going to go back and forth. I think RandomX has partly done well because the financial incentive if a ton of protocols used it and it wasn't primarily a Monero thing, then maybe there would be someone who'd find, then there'd at least be there'd be more incentive to develop ASICs that could do it even for a more limited time. Because the way they've done it, where they can upgrade things and you can kill any ASIC's progress, can work. I also like, Decred at one point, who, their proof of work, proof of stake hybrid, they eventually to not punish, but to realign the way the miners who were going a little too far, and with their ASICs, they voted to lower the balance between the two, between proof of work and proof of stake. And that way it changed the economics for people doing ASICs or anything like that. And why it, not something most chains could do, but it just goes to show that there's a lot of different levers and different experiments people can do. And I think that's awesome. I want to see chains try all sorts of different things. I'm happy that Bitcoin will be these huge farms of ASICs, and I love that Monero you can still do in CPUs, and I want people to try all sorts of crazy shit.
The other things on good.
Yeah, no, as I say, there's a lot of space for experimenting, and I want to see it. I want projects to do all sorts of things.
I was also going to add the people focus on ASIC versus non-ASIC, but also, even if it's not an ASIC, there's always going to be a more efficient version of an existing chip that will be the most cost-effective and power-efficient version for an algorithm. And that's to say, like, for example, say you wrote an algorithm that perfectly used all of the CUDA cores on an NVIDIA GPU and fully saturated the memory bandwidth on the recent series of cards. Well, the more efficient, or at least the more cost-effective version of that would be that exact same chip, but without the graphics pipeline and tensor cores and RTX cores, right? And so even if you do design an algorithm that is, you can't build an efficient ASIC for it, you can still build a more efficient version of a consumer chip, whether that's a CPU or a GPU, that only has the bits needed to do that algorithm. And if you try to do anything like, target all of the current compute on an NVIDIA chip, and so your algorithm has, uses the tensor cores and does matrix operations, and somehow you figure out a way to use the RTX cores in a hashing algorithm and the CUDA cores and the memory bandwidth, then next year there's going to be new GPUs with different balances of those different types of compute, maybe new types of compute. And so you're either going to have to update the algorithm, or now there's a more efficient chip that NVIDIA could build that would be cheaper, smaller die size, less componentry, that would still be more efficient at your algorithm. So even if it's ASIC resistant, it doesn't mean that consumer hardware is ever going to be the most efficient hardware that could be produced for that algorithm.
That's actually was my historically the reason I don't think proof of history is a good consensus mechanism, is because it's based on the idea that you have a good sense of the upper bound for efficiency for doing a particular algorithm, which, if history has shown, it's that doesn't last for very long, and it doesn't increased efficiencies, whether it's, removing things like Max was describing or ASICs or whatever, they don't diffuse into the world in a uniform manner. I may have a better chip than, you have a better chip than me today. I may have a better chip than you tomorrow. And technology doesn't expand the way a gas does. It expands in a much more random and confusing manner.
All right. And we got a chip flex from JCV. Um, I got a couple more questions on deck, gentlemen. We have seen a couple partners start launching Hemi BTC incentives. When is this going to be launched publicly?
I think we did already cover this, assuming the question is asking about the staked BTC product. So either end of this month or early January, just because the holidays, if things are ready to go, but it's the end of December, that obviously get pushed to, first, second week of January.
All right. What are you most excited about building right now on Hemi? And I'll open that up to the entire team.
A couple different things. So I think definitely the most technically interesting from like an engineering perspective is hBVM, white paper coming soon. We're doing a lot of really neat stuff with that that's useful, obviously, for Hemi and our tunnel system. And like I talked about earlier, for other native Bitcoin-backed DeFi primitives, some of which can generate yield sources or create other cool products for treasury management and stuff like that. So that's super interesting. We're doing some cool stuff with basically combining Ethereum proof of stake with Bitcoin proof of work to, in air quotes, keep each other in check. And so to give the kind of quick version of it from a technical perspective, basically Bitcoin's proof of work is objective, which means every node on the network that is able to talk to other nodes without full censorship is able to eventually gossip enough information to agree on the same canonical version of the chain. And so in Bitcoin, for example, if you have a chain with a total cumulative proof of work of X, and there's another chain with X plus 1, then all the nodes will gossip that and all agree that the chain with total cumulative difficulty X plus 1 is the canonical chain. Ethereum proof of stake doesn't have that. It's what's called weakly subjective. It has weak subjectivity, which means that essentially somebody with a lot of old consensus power can create an alternate version of the chain and then use that and confuse new nodes that are syncing with the network, because both the actual true canonical chain that everyone else agrees on, plus this alternate chain that the attacker made look from a fork resolution consensus perspective, both equally valid. And so what we're doing with hBitVM is using Bitcoin and Ethereum strengths together. So one of the issues with Bitcoin is the scripting system is very limited. And so, and we've talked about this ad nauseum in the past, but basically on Ethereum, you can build Turing complete smart contracts that can compute anything you want to compute, as long as you're within the gas limit of a transaction. On Bitcoin, you have very limited set of opcodes that you can actually use in a Bitcoin script. And one of those limitations is a lack of chain in self-introspection. And so when you're building ZK-based protocols, for example, the hBitVM tunnel system, you're not able in a Bitcoin script to validate something else happened on the current Bitcoin chain. So it runs in a complete vacuum. The only context you have about the current chain geometry at all as the timestamp, which is not sufficient for validating a ZK proof actually demonstrates that something happened on the same Bitcoin chain or the canonical Bitcoin chain that some other part of the protocol is executing on top of. And so the way we can solve that is we use Ethereum as a censorship resistant layer for agreeing on canonical Bitcoin state through updates to hBVM that anyone can make by relaying basically Bitcoin block header information through an Ethereum transaction or a Hemi transaction that updates hBVM state. And then we can use a update to the proof of proof protocol to publish data from Ethereum to Bitcoin to a little bit of hand waving, but basically inherit Bitcoin's objectivity, Bitcoin's proof of work objectivity to secure Ethereum against nothing at stake attacks. And that lets us build a system that creates this end-to-end construction where in order to attack the system and create an invalid ZK proof, you would need to both 51% attack Bitcoin and Ethereum. And so basically we use Ethereum as a way to, Ethereum and Hemi hBVM as a way to reflect, decide on and reflect canonical Bitcoin state back into Bitcoin. And then we use Bitcoin to make sure that that reflection can't be forged with nothing at stake attacks. So from an engineering perspective, that's definitely the most interesting part of the protocol. Some other things, one of the sort of toy ideas we've been talking about internally as something that could be a cool new Bitcoin-based protocol would be a private Bitcoin transaction mempool. So being able to basically broadcast encrypted Bitcoin transactions to the system and have a way where miners could include those transactions without knowing what is actually in the transaction, just knowing that A, it is a valid transaction, B, it doesn't conflict with any other transactions they're building in their block, which you can do with a combination of ZK proofs and some Bloom filters, at least probabilistically. And then you'd have a either FHE or maybe more traditional MPC-based system that only decrypts the transactions with a large group of thousands of participants potentially, if the Bitcoin miner submits a valid proof that they have a block that contains the encrypted transaction. And so that could be some cool privacy tech on the Bitcoin side for Bitcoin transaction front running, and also if we start to see more Bitcoin miners, censoring transactions that they don't like for whatever reason, this could be a cool solution to that as well. So I think that's interesting. And then beyond that, obviously on the protocol side, decentralizing the sequencer is a very fun engineering problem. And yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that for now. There's tons of other cool stuff on the MinerFi side, stuff on the Hemi Bitcoin side, with Hemi BTC staking, stuff with VE, Hemi, and expanding that out for governance and being able to decentralize some of these protocols as we roll them out. But I think I probably rambled enough on the fun engineering stuff that we're working on.
It's very appreciated. Joshua, Antonio, Matt, do you guys want to add anything to that? What is the most exciting thing that you're currently working on, or what are you most exciting about building right now?
I'm currently really enjoying working on the protocol side of some of the projects we have coming up, as well as just some optimizations of the daemons we currently have. I always enjoy trying to make things faster and work well together. I guess that's a bit of a general answer, but yeah, that's just the kind of things I like to do.
We appreciate general answers. Joshua, let's put you on the spot. How about you? What are you most excited about right now?
I think most recently infrastructure and figuring out how to properly secure and scale things has been the most interesting. We have a lot of new protocols and peer-to-peer systems that we're also working on, so there's a lot to do and a lot of interesting things happening.
He is also interested and excited about the technology behind the OG roll. just throwing that out there. All right. We have one more real question here, coming from Nar in chat. We're building a production inscription plus wrapper DApp that currently uses multiple off-chain Bitcoin indexers, Unisat, Ortiscan, etc., to verify inscriptions, existence, UTXO ownership, inscription payload hash versus our file hash, and confirmations before wrapping. For a production deployment today, is HBK plus hVM ready to be our sole Bitcoin truth source for these checks, no external indexers? Or do you recommend we still treat HBK as experimental and keep off-chain indexers in the verification path for now? If a hybrid is recommended, what's the suggested pattern?
Good question. So any of the current HBK and hVM features are production ready and they're being used in production by stuff like our Bitcoin tunnel. So if they have the features that you need for your inscription wrapping service, then you can definitely rely on them in production directly. That being said, there's some features of the inscription indexers that are not currently available in hVM. And so if you need those features, then for now you'd still have to rely on those third-party indexers. We are going to be doing an update to hVM at some point to add in indexers for some of the more popular protocols, so probably ordinals, BRC20s, and runes. But that's a future roadmap item. So if you need the additional information that those indexers give you, you'd still need to keep using them. But if hVM and HBK provide all the information you need for the protocol that you're building, then yeah, you can definitely rely on those in production.
Right. Um, let's see. I believe we have a couple more. Is Oh, okay. We are actually over time right now. Um, so I apologize. We had a couple more questions, but we are going to hold on them until next week's Midweek with Max. And again, there will be a follow-up AMA next week, and if not, we'll have an extended Midweek with Max where we cover some of the exciting things that I believe it's the white paper chat, correct, Max?
Yep, yeah. So next week we'll be doing Midweek with Max as normal, and then either as an addendum to that or as a separate breakout, maybe Wednesday, Thursday, we'll also do a hBitVM white paper tech deep dive.
Awesome. All right. I just want to thank all of the amigos for turning out today. Thank you to our incredible moderation team. Please join the fine folks over at Here for a Rumble session immediately following Midweek with Max. Please be on the lookout for the holiday meme contest that will be launched tomorrow. That will be moderator run. Congrats to all our winners from the quiz from last week. And in addition, we should have some more exciting stuff coming up. And thank you all so much for joining. I'm going to turn it over to the team for final outros, and we will see you next week.
All right, awesome. Thanks everyone for coming. We will see you next week, and stay tuned for the beta program. Hopefully we'll have information on that next week and people can start joining. And also stay tuned for the hBitVM white paper, which should be published by the end of the week. And also the V2 node update instructions, which should be going out in the next probably 1 to 2 days here. All right. Thanks everyone for coming, and we will see you next week.
Thanks so much, all. And yes, as a reminder, Alex reminded me, next week will be your last and only chance to get the Rap God roll before 2026. So take care, all. Have a great week. Thank you to Max. Thank you to Antonio. Thank you to John Greenwood and Joshua and JCV. We'll see you all next week.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.